There are moments in every soul's journey when heaven seems to fall silent. Prayers rise but no answers come. You reach for light, but your hands close on air. The songs that once lifted your heart now echo through emptiness, and the presence you once felt so vividly feels distant, unreachable. You whisper, "God, where are you?" But the question fades into still air, unanswered. And in that silence, the mind begins to wonder if perhaps you've been forgotten. The world keeps moving, indifferent to your ache. The sun still rises, the wind still blows, people still laugh. And yet, inside you, everything feels muted, suspended, waiting for a voice that does not come. This is the silence of God, the space between asking and receiving, between faith and sight. It is the desert where the spirit thirsts and the soul begins to see its own reflection. It is not a punishment, it is an invitation, for in silence, illusions die. The noise of the world fades, and all that remains is truth. And that truth is not found in the thunder of miracles, but in the whisper of stillness. The divine is not gone. It is simply speaking a different language. The absence you feel is not distance, it is depth. It is the infinite drawing you inward into the unseen chambers of faith. The silence is not rejection, it is recognition. It means you are ready to hear in a new way. When God is silent, it's because words are too small for what He's doing. The quiet becomes the canvas on which your soul learns to paint trust. And slowly, you begin to sense it. The faint hum beneath the stillness, the pulse that says, "I am here, even in this." You may not see the hand of heaven moving, but the silence itself is the movement, gentle, unseen, yet full of purpose. There is a particular ache reserved for the prayer that seems to go nowhere. You speak with sincerity, with tears, with the fragile hope that perhaps this will be the moment heaven breaks open, and all you hear is your own breathing. You light a candle, it flickers. You fold your hands, they tremble. You wait. The minutes lengthen, like corridors that refuse to end. You begin to replay the words you used, as if a different sentence might have unlocked the door. Maybe if you were purer, braver, more deserving. Maybe if your faith was stronger, your formula cleaner, your sacrifice larger. But love is not a vending machine, and God is not a lock to be picked. Prayer is not a spell, it is a meeting. And sometimes the one you meet chooses silence, not as absence, but as instruction. Unanswered prayers echo. They bounce off the walls of the heart until they find the hollow places you didn't know were there. In those hollows, your motives rise to the surface like letters in water. You begin to see what you were really asking for. Certainty instead of trust, control instead of communion, rescue instead of transformation. It is not wrong to ask for relief, it is human. But the silence asks a deeper question. Do you want relief or renewal? There are answers that would make your life easier, and there are answers that would make your soul larger. The first ends the need to wait. The second teaches you how to live. When heaven does not reply, it is often because the response is too vast for words, because what you asked for with your mouth is smaller than what you long for with your spirit, and the spirit is what God answers. Listen carefully to the echo. Notice how it returns changed. You asked for a path out. The echo asks for a heart that can walk any path. You asked for a closed door to open. The echo asks for courage to knock on others. You asked for the pain to stop. The echo asks for the wisdom to suffer well and not alone. In this school of silence, prayer becomes less of a performance and more of a posture. You stop arguing your case and start offering your life. Your "fix it, please" turns slowly into "form me, please." You discover that the most faithful prayer is sometimes the simplest. Here I am. No explanations, no threats or bargains. Just presence meeting presence. And then something subtle begins to happen. The room doesn't brighten, the phone doesn't buzz with news, but your chest loosens, the air grows breathable again. You notice the mercy of small things, the chair that holds you, the tea that warms you, the ordinary kindness of a friend's text that arrives at the right minute. These are not the answers you wrote in your head, but they are answers all the same, signs that the world is not indifferent to your pain, and neither is God. Do not despise the echo. It is training your ears to hear what cannot be said. It is thinning the veil between you and the holy, not by adding noise, but by removing what cannot last. When a prayer comes back to you unanswered, consider that it has been listened to so deeply that it must return revised, not rejected, refined, not ignored, enlarged. One day, perhaps without noticing, you will pray differently. There will be fewer adjectives, fewer explanations, fewer maps. You will pray like a window, clear, open, available to light. And you will discover that the goal of prayer was never to bend God to your will, but to let God bend you toward life. The echo will still come, but it will no longer frighten you. You will recognize its timbre, its patience, its strange tenderness. You will know that even the unanswered prayer is not wasted. It is compost for future gardens. It is groundwork for future roads. It is the shaping of a soul that can carry joy without breaking and carry sorrow without drowning. And somewhere in that quiet you will hear it, not an explanation but a presence, not a plan but a hand. It will not say, "Here is why," but it will say without words, "Here is where I am, with you." Every soul must walk through a desert, not the kind drawn on maps, but the one that stretches across the heart when comfort vanishes and meaning thins to air. The desert is not the punishment for faith, it is the proving ground of faith. It strips away every crutch and asks the simplest, hardest question: do you trust the unseen? At first, the emptiness terrifies you. There is no sound but your own footsteps, no answer but your own breath. Days blur, nights echo. Hope flickers like a candle at the mercy of the wind. You begin to think that even silence has abandoned you, but listen deeper. The desert hums with life, invisible to the careless eye. Roots twist under the sand. Seeds wait for a single drop. The same sun that scorches also sustains. And little by little you realize you are not being punished. You are being purified. The desert teaches endurance, not by comfort, but by confrontation. It teaches hunger, so you may finally taste gratitude. It teaches thirst, so you may recognize water as sacred. It teaches solitude, so you may learn that love was never meant to be dependency. Most people fear the desert because it offers no distractions, but therein lies its power. It forces you to face the noise you carried inside, the voices of comparison, fear, doubt, and unworthiness, until they burn away under the relentless truth of the sun. You will try to turn back, searching for the green places you once knew. But those oases were illusions. You outgrew them. What once quenched, you will now feel shallow. That is the sign that transformation has begun. And then, somewhere between exhaustion and surrender, you will stop fighting the silence. You will lie down on the warm sand, close your eyes, and for the first time, not demand answers. In that moment, peace will rise, not because the desert ends, but because you finally belong to it. The wind will sing through the dunes, and you'll hear your own soul joining in harmony. When you leave this desert, you will not walk the same. Your steps will carry the calm of those who have learned that silence is not emptiness, it's a teacher. And every grain of sand that once cut your feet will glisten as proof that even the barren can be beautiful. The most sacred work is the one you cannot see. While you wait for a sign, something is already moving in silence, beneath the surface of what you call delay. You may think nothing is happening, but heaven is a patient craftsman. It builds foundations before it builds futures. In the hidden places, God rearranges what your eyes can't reach. The detour you curse is the road being repaired ahead of you. The door that stays closed is keeping you from entering too soon. What feels like waiting is actually weaving, threads you cannot yet recognize, forming a tapestry you will one day call grace. The divine rarely announces its progress. It prefers quiet miracles, a change of heart, a softened word, a strength you didn't have before. You don't hear trumpets when roots take hold, but one day the bloom appears and you realize life was growing all along. The silence is the workshop of the unseen. It's where timing is shaped, where answers mature, where prayers find their truest form. If you could see what is being built behind the curtain, you'd understand why you had to pause. You'd fall to your knees in gratitude for the delays you once despised. Every unanswered moment is holding something being formed for your good. The unseen is not empty, it is divine in progress. And faith, at its deepest, is not believing that God will act, but trusting how He already is. One day, the curtain will lift, and what once felt like absence will shimmer with purpose. You'll see that every silence was filled with movement. Every no hid a greater yes. Every pause was love preparing the way. There is a voice that never raises itself, yet it commands creation. It doesn't compete with thunder or chaos. It hides beneath them. A whisper that only silence can reveal. When the world grows too loud, that whisper waits patiently for you to remember how to listen. You've heard it before, in the pause between your thoughts, in the calm that arrives after tears, in the way your chest expands when you finally stop trying to understand. It doesn't argue, it doesn't justify, it simply is. And every time you return to it, you remember who you were before fear began to speak louder. The divine does not shout over the noise, because love never forces its way in. It invites. It waits until you are still enough to recognize the difference between sound and truth. Because truth doesn't demand, it draws. It calls you back softly, like a tide reclaiming what belongs to the sea. You once thought silence meant distance, but now you know, silence is how God speaks when words are too small. He whispers through peace that shouldn't exist, through the timing that feels too perfect to be coincidence, through the strength that appears in the middle of your breaking. This whisper is not a sound, it's a resonance. It vibrates through your being, reminding you that you are not separate from the source. The same breath that moves the wind moves through you. The same pulse that holds the stars holds your heartbeat steady. You don't find this voice through effort, you find it through surrender. When you stop chasing what's next and simply rest in what is, the whisper grows clearer. It says, you are not lost, you are learning. It says, you are not forgotten, you are being formed. It says, I never left. Every time you return to the quiet, you step closer to eternity. You realize that God doesn't need to speak louder. You only need to listen deeper. Waiting feels like doing nothing, but in truth, it is one of life's most sacred acts. It tests the strength of your trust and the depth of your peace. Every soul that walks by faith will one day stand in the hallway between promise and fulfillment, holding on to nothing but breath and belief. In that space, impatience whispers, move, force it, make it happen. But wisdom answers, stay, let the soil work, because everything alive grows in silence before it grows in sight. A seed doesn't demand the dawn, it surrenders to it. Waiting purifies desire. It burns away what was never essential. Ego, urgency, pride, until only truth remains. You begin to see that what you're waiting for is not as important as who you're becoming while you wait. Every delay chisels your character. Every pause strengthens your capacity to receive without clinging. The divine uses waiting as a furnace, not to destroy, but to refine. Patience is not weakness. It is faith stretched into maturity. It is the art of trusting that timing is mercy, that what hasn't arrived yet is still being perfected behind the veil. You may not notice it, but even in stillness, your soul is expanding. Your prayers are deepening. Your hope is learning endurance. And when the moment finally comes, when the doors open, when the answers unfold, you'll realize that the waiting itself was the miracle. Because in waiting, you didn't just receive what you asked for, you became ready for it. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it's the presence of peace. It is the sacred pause where you stop running from what hurts and begin to rest inside what heals. The world glorifies speed, noise, and constant becoming, but heaven speaks a slower language, one of breath, awareness, and quiet revelation. When you enter stillness, time feels different. The past loosens its grip, the future stops shouting, and the present expands like a vast horizon. You begin to notice what you used to overlook: the pulse in your wrist, the hum of life in the air, the subtle warmth of simply being. This is where the divine meets you, not in striving, but in surrender. In stillness, clarity begins to rise like dawn after a storm. The fog that clouded your thoughts starts to lift, not because you've solved anything, but because you've stopped resisting. You realize that peace was never something to achieve. It was something to uncover. It lived beneath every fear, every plan, every noise. You were simply too busy to hear it. Stillness doesn't change your surroundings. It changes your sight. You stop seeing problems as punishments and start seeing them as invitations. You stop chasing answers and start trusting timing. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start whispering, "Show me." In this quiet space, God doesn't appear in lightning or thunder. He appears in presence. You sense him not as a visitor, but as a rhythm. In your inhale, in your exhale, in the steady pulse of life continuing despite everything. The stillness holds you like an old friend, asking nothing but your attention. And you begin to understand that stillness is not a luxury, it's survival. It's the place where the soul repairs what the noise of the world has broken. It's the moment when you realize that you don't need to chase peace, you only need to stop running from it. Faith rarely returns with fanfare. It comes back like a sunrise, slow, steady, almost imperceptible at first. One morning you realize your heart is breathing differently. You no longer wake up weighed down by the same questions, you simply wake up willing to trust again. This is the quiet resurrection, the rebirth of belief after the silence. It's not the naive faith you once had, built on the need for constant proof. It's deeper, wiser, refined by waiting and tempered by tears. This faith doesn't demand understanding. It chooses to walk even when the path is dim. You stop needing to see where God is leading and start trusting that He is. You stop begging for signs because you finally recognize them everywhere. In the timing of a friend's call, in the song that plays at the right moment, in the way peace visits your heart without reason. This faith is not fragile. It does not break when life breaks. It bends, it trembles, it even questions, but it never lets go. Because true faith is not the absence of doubt. It's the decision to keep believing through it. When faith returns, it doesn't erase the scars, it redeems them. You begin to see that the cracks were never flaws, they were doorways for light. Every disappointment, every loss, every silence was not wasted. It was soil for your growth. Your pain didn't destroy your faith, it deepened it. Now when you pray, it's no longer out of desperation but out of intimacy. You no longer ask for a life without storms, you ask for an anchor that holds. You no longer pray for things to go your way, you pray to stay aligned with the way that leads you home. Faith has returned, not loud, not proud, but alive, and you realize that what you called the end was really the beginning of trust that no longer depends on answers. It is a peace that whispers, "Even here, even now, I believe." Presence has a sound, but it's not made of words. It's the hum that fills a room when you stop speaking and simply exist. It's the warmth that lingers in the air when peace enters unnoticed. After the silence, after the questions, after the long waiting, you begin to hear it. At first you think it's your imagination, a quiet pulse beneath everything, steady and alive. But as you listen closer, you realize this is what you were searching for all along. Not a voice from above, but a presence within. You used to believe you had to reach heaven. Now you know heaven reaches you. Through every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of stillness that refuses to leave. It was never about climbing higher, it was about noticing deeper. Presence is not loud, but it fills all things. It turns an ordinary room into a cathedral, a breath into prayer, a single moment into eternity. You begin to walk slower, speak softer, and see clearer, because everything feels sacred now. You sense it when sunlight touches your face, when rain lands gently on your skin, when someone says your name with kindness. You realize that God was never far. He was waiting for you to slow down enough to recognize him. His voice was never gone. It was tuned to a frequency your hurry couldn't hear. The sound of presence is not an event, it's a remembrance. It's the music beneath the chaos, the rhythm beneath your rushing, the heartbeat of creation whispering, "You are safe, you are seen, you are loved." And once you've heard it, truly heard it, you can't unhear it. You begin to notice it everywhere, in the laughter of children, in the cry of the weary, even in your own silence, where the divine hums softly, endlessly, "I am here." And then, at last you understand, the voice was never gone. It had only changed its tone. It spoke through every silence, through every unanswered prayer, through every waiting season that reshaped your faith. It spoke through loss, through longing, through love that refused to die. You look back and realize the divine was never absent. It was weaving your story with invisible hands. The moments you thought were empty were overflowing with mercy. The times you thought you were forgotten were when you were being formed. And the silence that once felt cruel now feels holy, a sacred chamber where your soul learned the sound of eternity. This is the secret of the silence of God. He never stopped speaking. He was teaching you to listen differently. Words were too small, too fragile for what he wanted you to know. So he spoke in sunsets, in delays, in peace that came without reason. He spoke in the steady rhythm of your survival. He spoke in the fact that even when faith trembled, you did not let go. Now you hear him everywhere, not as a voice in the distance, but as a frequency that fills everything. The sound of leaves moving in the wind, the heartbeat you feel when you close your eyes, the pulse of love that holds the world together. You walk lighter now, not because life became easy, but because you finally stopped carrying what was never yours to bear. You no longer beg the heavens to speak. You realize they never stopped singing. You live as one who listens, to the ordinary made holy, to the hidden made clear, to the silence made sacred. This is faith beyond fear, peace beyond understanding, and love beyond language. This is the awakening of the soul that has walked through silence and come out shining. The divine didn't disappear, it moved in, and in that stillness you hear it again, the soft, unending truth that echoes through every corner of creation. I was here all along.